They came from the stars with fire and arrogance, believing Earth's frozen peaks would be the easiest to conquer. But in the thin air of the Himalayas, they found no surrender, only silence, steel, and snow. Echo Base was never meant to be a battlefield, but when the stars fell on sacred ground, humanity rose from the ice. And the mountains, our oldest guardians, fought with us when stars fell on sacred ground. The Watchers from Above. Commander Zifex of the Crimson Fleet pressed his elongated fingers against the viewing portal of his flagship, the Dominion's Edge. Below him, a blue marble spun slowly in the void, streaked with white clouds and crowned with brilliant ice caps. His species, the Kirathi, had conquered 47 worlds across 12 star systems. This would be 48. Analysis complete, Commander, reported his science officer, a thin creature with silver skin and 4 arms. The planet shows primitive development. Most of the surface is covered in frozen water. The dominant species appears to concentrate in warmer regions. Zifex nodded, his crimson scales catching the starlight. The Kirathi thrived in desert heat and scorching climates. To them, cold was death itself. What of the frozen regions? Any signs of significant life? Minimal, sir. Scattered settlements at high altitudes, probably exile colonies or research outposts. Their technology readings are practically non-existent. The commander's mandibles clicked in amusement. Perfect. We'll establish our forward base in the coldest, highest region. If we can conquer their most desolate territories first, the rest will surrender without resistance. Fear spreads fastest when hope dies in the harshest places. His tactical officer, Vextar, pulled up a holographic display. I recommend these coordinates, Commander. The region they call Himalayas. Extreme altitude, sub-zero temperatures, and minimal population. Our environmental suits will give us complete advantage over any local resistance. Zifex studied the snow-capped peaks with satisfaction. Deploy the advance fleet. Show these ice dwellers what true power looks like. Echo Base 8,000 meters above sea level, Dr. Maya Thorne checked the weather monitoring equipment for the 3rd time that morning. The wind howled across the reinforced dome of Echo Base, carrying ice crystals that struck the windows like tiny bullets. She tucked a strand of dark hair back under her thermal hood and frowned at the atmospheric readings. Chen, are you seeing this pressure drop? She called to the man checking emergency supplies near the communications array. Sergeant First Class Chen Wei looked up from his inventory checklist. At 32, he was the youngest person ever to complete China's elite mountain warfare program, but his weathered face showed the wisdom of someone who had learned to respect the mountains. Storm coming? Not like anything I've seen in 5 years of data, Maya replied. She was half British, half Nepalese, and had spent most of her adult life studying weather patterns in the world's highest places. Her instincts were rarely wrong. The barometric pressure is dropping faster than a spring avalanche. Dr. Yuki Tanaka emerged from the equipment room, her black hair dusted with frost from working on the backup generators. The Japanese seismologist was small in stature but fierce in determination. Actually, I'm picking up something strange on the seismic monitors too. Vibrations that don't match any natural patterns. Maya moved to Yuki's station and examined the data. Irregular pulses, too rhythmic for geological activity, too powerful for aircraft. Could be military exercises from one of the neighboring countries? At this altitude, in this weather? Chen shook his head. No military in the world operates regularly above 8,000 meters. The logistics alone would be nightmare. The 4th member of their team, Pemba Sherpa, entered through the main airlock, stomping snow from his boots. At 53, he was the most experienced high-altitude guide in the region, a man whose grandfather had been among the first to reach Everest's summit. His weather-beaten face carried the quiet wisdom of someone who had listened to the mountains speak for decades. The birds are wrong, he said simply, pulling off his thick gloves. Maya looked up. Wrong how? Ravens flew south this morning, all of them. In winter during storm season, they should seek shelter, not migrate. Something has frightened them. He paused, studying the ice formations on the window. The mountain spirits are restless. Chen might have dismissed such talk from anyone else, but Pemba's traditional knowledge had saved their lives more than once. The old guide could predict weather changes hours before their sophisticated instruments detected them. Maybe we should radio base camp, Yuki suggested. If there's military activity in the area, command should know about it. Maya nodded and moved to the communication station. She adjusted the frequency and spoke into the microphone. Base camp, this is Echo Station. Come in, over. Static. She tried again. Any station. This is Echo Base requesting status update on atmospheric anomalies. Please respond. More static, but underneath it something else. a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the metal structure of their base. Chen's military training kicked in immediately. He moved to the window and raised a pair of high-powered binoculars. "Maya, kill the radio, now." The urgency in his voice made her comply without question. The humming grew louder. "What do you see?" she whispered. Chen's face had gone pale. "Ships. Coming down through the cloud layer. But they're not from any air force I know." First contact. The vessels that descended from the storm clouds defied every law of aerodynamics Maya knew. They moved like liquid mercury, flowing around air currents rather than cutting through them. No visible propulsion systems, no wings, no rotors, just smooth, dark surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Count?" Chen asked, his voice steady despite the impossible sight. 12 landing craft, 3 larger vessels maintaining altitude." Maya pressed her face to the reinforced glass. "Chen, those aren't human designs." Yuki had moved to her equipment station and was frantically adjusting sensors. "I'm detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. The power output is enormous, but the energy type is completely unknown." Pemba stood motionless by the window, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. "The mountain warned us," he said quietly. "The spirits knew strangers were coming." The lead vessel settled onto the snow-covered plateau about 500 meters from Echo Base. Despite its size, it touched down without disturbing the powder snow beneath it, as if it weighed nothing at all. The others arranged themselves in a perfect formation around it. "We need to contact someone," Maya said, reaching for the emergency beacon. "Wait." Chen held up a hand. "Let's see what they do first. If they're hostile, calling for help might just paint a target on rescue teams." A section of the lead vessel's hull simply dissolved, revealing an opening filled with pale blue light. Figures began to emerge, and Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. They were tall, perhaps 7 feet in height, with elongated limbs and crimson scales that seemed to shimmer in the cold air. They moved with fluid grace despite wearing what appeared to be environmental suits. Each carried equipment that hummed with the same energy signature Yuki's instruments had detected. "My God," Yuki whispered. "They're actually here. They're actually real." The aliens spread out across the plateau with military precision. Some began setting up devices that immediately started to glow with internal light. Others seemed to be taking measurements of the environment. Then their leader stepped forward. Even at a distance, his presence was commanding. He raised what appeared to be a communication device and spoke. His words somehow reached them through the base's external microphones, translated into perfect English by technology beyond their understanding. "Primitive inhabitants of this frozen wasteland," the voice was smooth but carried an unmistakable tone of condescension. "We are the Kirathi of the Crimson Fleet. We have claimed this world for our empire. You will surrender immediately and submit to processing." Maya felt anger rise in her chest. The casual dismissal, the assumption of superiority, the complete disregard for humanity's right to exist. She moved to their external communication system and opened a channel. "This is Dr. Maya Thorne of the International High Altitude Research Station. You are trespassing on sovereign territory. Identify yourselves and state your intentions." A sound that might have been laughter came through the speakers. "Sovereign territory? You claim ownership of this ice tomb? Your species huddles in heated shelters dependent on primitive technology to survive in your own world's environment. You are not conquerors, you are barely survivors." Chen moved beside Maya at the communications panel. His military bearing was evident even through the audio pickup. "This is Sergeant Chen Wei of the People's Liberation Army. You have landed in international territory without permission. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." This time the alien's amusement was unmistakable. "Military? In this desolation? What army sends soldiers to guard empty ice and worthless rock? Your presence here only proves how desperately weak your species must be." Pemba stepped forward and gently moved Maya aside. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had earned respect through decades of life in the world's harshest places. "I am Pemba, son of Tenzin, grandson of Norbu who first walked the sacred peaks. These mountains have been home to my people for 2,000 years. We do not claim to own them. We are part of them, and they are part of us." The alien commander paused for a moment as if processing this unexpected response. "Indigenous primitives, your attachment to this frozen waste is proof of your evolutionary failure. The Kirathi have conquered 47 worlds, each more challenging than this ice ball. We thrive in environments that would kill your pathetic species in moments." "Is that so?" Pemba's voice remained calm, but Maya detected something underneath it, a subtle challenge. "Tell me, Star Traveler, what is the current wind speed at our elevation?" Another pause. "Irrelevant information. The temperature tonight will drop to -42 degrees Celsius. How long will your environmental suits maintain heating at that temperature while your equipment draws power? Our technology is superior to anything your species has developed. The barometric pressure is still falling. In approximately 4 hours, we will experience a ground blizzard with winds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. Your ships are positioned in a natural wind funnel that will create downdrafts reaching 160 kilometers per hour. Maya looked at Pemba with new understanding. He wasn't just sharing information, he was testing them. Your attempts at intimidation are pathetic, the alien replied. We have survived the storms of Zerion Prime, where acid rain falls upward and lightning strikes from the ground. Your little snow squalls are nothing. Yuki leaned toward the microphone. Actually, the electromagnetic interference from the approaching storm system will disrupt most electronic equipment. I hope your environmental suits have backup power sources that don't rely on wireless energy transmission. Chen added, and the snow accumulation in the next 12 hours will be approximately 2 meters. I hope your vessels can lift off under that kind of weight load. There was a longer pause this time. Then the alien's voice returned, noticeably less confident. You attempt to create fear with tales of weather. The Kirathi adapt to any environment. Maya smiled grimly and keyed the microphone one final time. We're not trying to create fear. We're offering assistance. This is our home. We know how to survive here. You clearly don't. The storm begins. The first snowflakes began falling as the alien commander cut the communication. Maya watched through the reinforced windows as the Kirathi troops moved with less certainty now, constantly checking their instruments and adjusting their equipment. How long do we have? Chen asked. Maya consulted her weather monitoring systems. 6 hours until the worst of it hits, but conditions will start deteriorating in the next 2 hours. What are they doing out there? Yuki pointed to where several aliens were attempting to set up what appeared to be a large communications array. Pemba studied their movements with the eye of someone who had watched countless expeditions struggle against the mountain's challenges. They are fighting the wind. Their equipment is not designed for these conditions. See how they keep having to re-anchor their devices? Indeed, the aliens were having difficulty with even basic setup procedures. Their technology, so impressive moments ago, seemed to malfunction regularly in the cold. Operators kept removing panels and making adjustments. Their mistake, Chen observed, is assuming that superior technology automatically means superior adaptation. They've probably never operated in conditions like this. Maya nodded. We need to prepare for siege conditions. If this storm is as bad as the readings suggest, no one is going anywhere for at least 48 hours. As they worked to secure their base and prepare emergency supplies, Maya found herself thinking about the alien commander's words. Primitives, evolutionary failures, ice tomb. The casual dismissal of humanity's achievements, the assumption that surviving in Earth's harshest environments was somehow a sign of weakness rather than strength. They had made a fundamental error in judgment. They saw the ice and cold as obstacles to be overcome with technology, but Maya and her team didn't overcome the environment. They worked with it, they understood it, they were part of it. Outside, the Kirathi continued their preparations, but their movements were becoming more frantic as the wind picked up and the temperature continued to drop. Several of their devices had already shut down, and Maya could see them struggling to understand why their technology was failing. The mountain is already speaking to them, Pemba said quietly, watching the aliens work. But they do not know how to listen. Chen checked his equipment one more time and looked out at the plateau where the alien forces were establishing their base. Maybe it's time we taught them. As the storm clouds gathered overhead and the first real winds of the approaching blizzard began to howl across the peaks, Maya realized that the Kirathi had made another crucial miscalculation. They hadn't just landed in a remote research station. They had challenged humanity on ground where humans had spent generations learning not just to survive, but to thrive. The mountain would teach them the difference, and if they survived the lesson, they might finally understand that Earth's frozen peaks weren't a wasteland populated by primitives. They were home to some of the toughest, most adaptable people in the universe. The storm was coming, and the Kirathi were about to discover why the people of the high places had never been conquered by anyone, even by visitors from the stars. The mountain strikes back. Lessons from the storm. The blizzard hit Echo Base with the fury of an angry god. For 18 hours, winds screamed across the plateau at speeds that would have torn apart most structures. The temperature plummeted to -52 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in seconds. Inside their reinforced dome, Maya and her team monitored conditions while conserving power and heat. Through the storm's fury, they watched the Kirathi struggle. The aliens' first mistake became apparent within 3 hours of the storm's arrival. Their environmental suits, designed for the scorching heat of their desert homeworld, consumed enormous amounts of energy maintaining internal temperature. By the 6th hour, Maya observed through thermal imaging that several alien soldiers had already retreated to their ships, their suits' power cells depleted. Their commander is still outside, Chen reported, studying the heat signatures through their advanced monitoring equipment. But look at this. He adjusted the display to show energy readings. His suit is drawing power wirelessly from their main ship. Yuki looked up from her workstation where she had been analyzing the aliens' technology signatures. That explains the tether cable I saw earlier, but wireless power transmission has severe limitations in extreme weather. Pemba, who had been silently watching the storm, spoke without turning from the window. The mountain is teaching them their first lesson. Technology that does not respect the environment will fail when the environment shows its strength. By the storm's end, the Kirathi had lost 6 of their 12 landing craft to equipment failure. The remaining vessels were half buried in snowdrifts, their crews working frantically to dig them out with tools clearly not designed for such conditions. Maya opened a communication channel as the winds finally died down. Kirathi vessels, this is Echo Base. Do you require assistance? The response came after a long pause, and Commander Zifex's voice had lost much of its earlier arrogance. We do not require aid from primitives. Understood, Maya replied calmly. Just so you know, the barometric pressure indicates another storm system approaching in approximately 36 hours. This one will be larger. She closed the channel and turned to her team. Time to show them what humans can do. The network awakens. While the Kirathi struggled to restore their damaged equipment, Maya activated a communication system the aliens hadn't detected. Hidden within the mountains across a 1,000-kilometer range, other research stations, weather monitoring posts, and indigenous communities had been watching the invasion. The response was immediate and coordinated. From Station Alpha 7, nestled in the Karakoram range, came Dr. Sarah Mitchell's voice. Echo Base, we have visual confirmation of 3 Kirathi scout ships in our sector. They attempted to establish a forward base on the Gasherbrunn Glacier. The glacier shifted and buried their equipment under 200 tons of ice. Station Beta 3, positioned in the Annapurna circuit, reported similar encounters. The aliens tried to set up some kind of energy harvesting device near our location, reported Tenzin Norbu, a local guide whose family had lived in these mountains for generations. When they activated it, it triggered an avalanche. They're currently trapped in a valley with no way out until spring. Dr. Rajesh Patel from the high-altitude meteorological station on Nanda Devi added, they sent a patrol to investigate our facility. The patrol got lost in a whiteout and wandered in circles for 8 hours before we guided them back to their base. Their navigation systems couldn't compensate for the magnetic interference from the iron deposits in these peaks. Maya smiled grimly as report after report came in. The Kirathi had made the same mistake that had claimed hundreds of inexperienced climbers over the decades. They had assumed that superior technology could substitute for understanding and respect for the environment. Chen had been monitoring Kirathi communications frequencies and was beginning to piece together their tactical situation. They're calling for reinforcements, he reported, but they're also requesting what they call environmental adaptation specialists and extreme weather equipment. Their fleet commanders are not happy. Yuki looked up from a device she had been modifying. I've been analyzing the electromagnetic signatures from their technology. I think I understand why their equipment keeps failing. She activated a small display showing wave patterns and energy readings. Their power systems operate on a frequency that creates resonance with ice crystals. Every time the temperature drops below -30 degrees, their equipment starts experiencing harmonic interference. The colder it gets, the worse the interference becomes. Maya studied the readings with growing excitement. Are you saying their technology is fundamentally incompatible with cold weather? More than that, Yuki replied. I think I can amplify the interference. If we modify our radio equipment to broadcast on specific frequencies, we could disrupt their systems over a wide area. Pemba had been listening quietly, but now he spoke with the voice of experience. The mountain people have another advantage. We know the paths the strangers cannot see. The invisible war. Over the following days, the Kirathi found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't identify or locate. Their equipment failed at crucial moments. Their scout patrols became lost in terrain that looked simple but proved treacherous. Their communication systems experienced interference that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Maya coordinated the resistance from Echo Base, using the network of mountain communities and research stations as her command structure. Each group contributed their unique knowledge and capabilities. The Sherpa communities, with their unparalleled knowledge of high-altitude terrain, guided Kirathi patrols into box canyons and dead-end valleys. The aliens' sophisticated navigation systems designed for open space and clear sightlines couldn't compensate for the labyrinthine geography of the mountain ranges. Scientific stations contributed technical warfare. Dr. Patel used his weather modification equipment to create localized fog banks that concealed human movement while confusing alien sensors. Dr. Mitchell's team in the Karakoram employed their avalanche monitoring system to trigger controlled snowslides that buried Kirathi equipment without harming personnel. Yuki's interference broadcasts proved devastatingly effective. Kirathi vehicles found their engines shutting down unexpectedly. Their communication arrays broadcast static instead of signals. Their environmental suits experienced power fluctuations that forced troops to retreat to their ships for emergency recharging. But the most effective weapon proved to be something the aliens couldn't understand or counter: human adaptability. Chen led a team of volunteers in what he called mountain warfare with a twist. Using traditional climbing techniques combined with modern military tactics, they moved through terrain the Kirathi couldn't even detect, let alone navigate. They appeared from snow caves to plant monitoring devices on alien equipment, then vanished back into the landscape before the aliens realized they had been observed. "It's like fighting ghosts," Commander Zifex complained during an intercepted communication with his fleet. "They appear, strike, and disappear. Our sensors show nothing but empty ice and rock, but our equipment keeps failing and our patrols keep getting lost." The response from the Kirathi Fleet Command was predictable. Increase technological deployment, expand surveillance coverage, deploy advanced combat units. Maya listened to the intercepted communications with satisfaction. "They still don't understand," she told her team. "They think this is a technology problem that requires a technology solution." Pemba, who had been teaching several young scientists traditional survival techniques, looked up from his work. "My grandfather once told me about the British expeditions in the early days of mountain climbing. They brought the finest equipment, the most advanced gear available, but they died while our people survived because they tried to conquer the mountain instead of learning from it." "The Kirathi are making the same mistake," Chen observed. "They're trying to impose their way of doing things instead of adapting to local conditions." The Avalanche Gambit. The turning point came when Kirathi Fleet Command made a critical error in judgment. Frustrated by their force's lack of progress, they deployed their environmental reconfiguration device, a massive machine designed to alter local weather patterns and terrain features. The device was the size of a city block, requiring 3 of their largest ships to transport and deploy. Its purpose was to melt the snow and ice across a 50-kilometer radius, creating temperate conditions where Kirathi forces could operate at full efficiency. Maya watched through long-range surveillance as the aliens positioned their weather modification system on a broad plateau surrounded by some of the highest peaks in the region. The location was strategically perfect for their purposes and tactically disastrous for their survival. "They've set up in the most avalanche-prone area in the entire mountain range," she told Chen with barely contained excitement. "That plateau sits directly below 3 different avalanche zones. If those ice fields destabilize..." Chen studied the topographical maps and grinned. "The entire northern face would come down, millions of tons of snow and ice." Yuki was already working on calculations. "If we can time the interference with their weather device to coincide with the natural stress points in the ice sheet, we won't be causing an avalanche," Maya realized. "We'll be preventing them from stopping one that's already building naturally." Pemba consulted weather patterns and traditional signs that his people had used for centuries to predict mountain conditions. "The ice is ready to fall," he confirmed. "The stranger's heat machine will be the trigger, but the mountain has been preparing this lesson for weeks." The plan required precise timing and coordination across multiple teams. As the Kirathi prepared to activate their environmental reconfiguration device, human teams positioned themselves at key points throughout the mountain range. Dr. Mitchell's team would use their seismic monitoring equipment to identify the exact moment when ice stress reached critical levels. Dr. Patel would create atmospheric conditions that would amplify the natural avalanche triggers. Yuki would disrupt the Kirathi device's safety systems at the crucial moment, and Chen's mountain warfare specialists would ensure that human personnel were safely positioned when the mountain delivered its verdict. "Remember," Maya broadcast to all teams, "we're not attacking them. We're simply allowing the mountain to respond naturally to their interference." The Kirathi activated their device at dawn on the 7th day after the first storm. The massive machine hummed to life, projecting waves of thermal energy across the plateau and surrounding peaks. Ice began to melt. Snow started to sublimate into steam. The local temperature rose 15 degrees in the first hour. The aliens celebrated their technological triumph. Their environmental suits switched to cooling mode. Their equipment operated at peak efficiency. Commander Zifex transmitted a triumphant message to his fleet. Reconfiguration successful. Local environment now suitable for standard operations. That transmission was still echoing through space when the mountain answered. The mountain's verdict. The avalanche began as a whisper. A small crack appeared in an ice shelf 3 kilometers above the Kirathi position. The crack widened. Other cracks appeared. The artificial warming had destabilized ice formations that had been stable for decades. Maya watched through her surveillance equipment as the aliens scrambled to understand what was happening. Their sensors detected the seismic activity, but their computer systems, designed for stable environments, couldn't process the rapid cascade of geological events fast enough to predict the outcome. Avalanche imminent, Dr. Mitchell's voice crackled over the communication network. All human personnel to safe positions. Estimate impact in 4 minutes. The Kirathi finally understood their danger when the first chunks of ice, each the size of a building, began tumbling down the mountainside. Commander Zifex screamed orders to evacuate, but their weather modification device required 30 minutes to safely shut down. They had 4 minutes. Yuki's electromagnetic interference ensured that the device's emergency shutdown protocols failed. The machine continued operating, melting more ice, creating more instability, accelerating the avalanche that was now racing toward the plateau at over 200 kilometers per hour. Some Kirathi forces managed to reach their ships and lift off before the avalanche arrived. Others attempted to find shelter behind their massive weather device. A few simply stood paralyzed, watching millions of tons of snow and ice thunder toward them with the inevitability of natural law. The impact shook the entire mountain range. The sound was heard over 300 kilometers away. When the snow finally settled, the plateau was buried under 40 meters of compacted ice and debris. The Kirathi weather modification device was entombed so deeply that it would not see sunlight again for centuries. Commander Zifex's ship circled the devastation, scanning for survivors and salvageable equipment. His communications with the fleet were intercepted by Maya's team, and his voice carried a tone they had never heard before: uncertainty. Fleet Command, this is Zifex. Environmental reconfiguration has resulted in unexpected consequences. Request immediate reinforcement and geological assessment specialists. The response from Fleet Command was swift and angry. Explain how a primitive species with no advanced technology has neutralized our most sophisticated environmental control system. There was a long pause before Zifex replied. Fleet Command, I am beginning to suspect that the absence of advanced technology may actually be an advantage in this environment. Maya smiled as she listened to the transmission. The Kirathi were finally beginning to understand the lesson the mountain had been teaching them. But understanding and adapting were two different things entirely. And the humans of the high places were just getting started. The Summit of Defiance. Fleet's Descent. 3 days after the avalanche buried their weather modification system, the Kirathi Fleet Command made a decision that would change the course of the invasion. Admiral Vorth, Supreme Commander of the Crimson Fleet, personally descended to Earth's surface aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion. The massive vessel, 5 kilometers long and bristling with weapons designed to crack planets, settled into orbit above the Himalayas like a metallic moon. Its shadow fell across multiple mountain ranges, and its presence could be felt in the electromagnetic interference that disrupted communications across half the continent. Maya monitored the flagship's arrival from Echo Base, now serving as the unofficial coordination center for human resistance across the mountain regions. The readings were sobering. The ship's power output exceeded the total energy consumption of several small nations. They're not playing games anymore, Chen observed, studying the tactical displays. That's their primary battle cruiser. They've escalated from exploration to full military conquest. Yuki looked up from her analysis of the flagship's energy signatures. The interference from that ship is disrupting our communication networks. I'm having trouble maintaining contact with our other stations. Pemba, who had been unusually quiet since the avalanche, finally spoke. The mountain spirits are troubled. This new presence brings a darkness that extends beyond the physical realm. Admiral Vorth's first communication to Earth was broadcast on all frequencies, in every human language simultaneously. The translation technology was flawless, but the message was unmistakably threatening. Humans of the frozen peaks. The Admiral's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. I am Admiral Vorth of the Kirathi Crimson Fleet. Your species has demonstrated unexpected resistance to standard conquest protocols. This resistance ends now. The transmission paused and tactical displays showed energy building in the flagship's primary weapon systems. You have 1 Earth rotation to surrender unconditionally. Submit to processing and relocation, and your deaths will be swift. Continue resistance, and we will demonstrate why 47 worlds kneel before Kirathi power. Maya keyed her response immediately. Admiral Vorth, this is Dr. Maya Thorne, representing the human settlements of the high mountain regions. We reject your ultimatum. This is our home, and we will defend it. The Admiral's laughter was cold and mechanical. Dr. Thorne, your primitive weapons cannot reach my position. Your technology cannot penetrate our defenses. Your species cannot survive what we are prepared to unleash. Maybe not, Maya replied calmly. But Admiral, you've been on our world for 2 weeks now. Tell me, how many of your advanced forces are still operational? The silence that followed was telling. The network spreads. While Admiral Vorth contemplated his response, Maya's network of mountain communities had been expanding beyond anyone's imagination. Word of the alien invasion and human resistance had spread through traditional communication channels that the Kirathi couldn't detect or disrupt. Runners carrying messages through high-altitude passes connected isolated communities across thousands of kilometers. Radio operators using equipment so old it operated on frequencies the aliens hadn't bothered to monitor shared information and coordinated responses. Most importantly, indigenous knowledge networks that had existed for centuries suddenly became crucial intelligence assets. Dr. Sarah Mitchell reported from the Karakoram Range. Maya, we're not alone out here anymore. 3 Balti villages have joined our resistance network. They've been tracking Kirathi movements using traditional scouting methods and have mapped every alien position across a 100-kilometer radius. From the Annapurna circuit, Tenzin Norbu's message carried excitement. The Gurung communities have shared the locations of every cave system, hidden pass, and emergency shelter from here to the Tibetan plateau. The strangers cannot move without being observed, and they cannot find us when we choose to disappear. Even more significantly, international mountain communities were making contact. A message from the Andes brought news that similar resistance networks were forming in South America. Communications from the Rockies, the Alps, the Caucasus, and other mountain ranges worldwide indicated that the Kirathi had underestimated the scope of human mountain adaptation. Dr. Elena Vasquez transmitted from a research station in the Peruvian Andes. The aliens tried to establish a base at 5,000 meters altitude. The local Quechua communities led them into an area with almost no oxygen. Their environmental suits couldn't compensate fast enough. They had to evacuate after losing half their personnel to altitude sickness. From the Alps came reports of Kirathi forces becoming lost in cave systems that local communities had used for shelter for thousands of years. From the Rockies, news of alien equipment failing in temperatures and wind conditions that human mountain dwellers considered normal. Maya realized that the resistance was becoming something the Kirathi had never encountered in 47 previous conquests. A global network of people who had spent generations adapting to environments the invaders couldn't comprehend. The Alliance Admiral Vorth's response to Maya's challenge came in the form of targeted strikes against known human positions. Energy beams from the flagship lanced down from orbit, turning entire mountain peaks into superheated plasma. The display of power was meant to terrify the human resistance into submission. Instead, it revealed the Admiral's fundamental misunderstanding of his opponents. The beams struck empty positions. Every targeted location had been abandoned hours before the attack, the human defenders having moved to secondary positions using routes and methods invisible to Kirathi surveillance. The energy that should have eliminated human resistance centers instead carved new valleys in uninhabited rock. Admiral, Maya's voice carried a note of pity as she responded to the bombardment. You're fighting the wrong war against the wrong enemy in the wrong place. Explain, came the terse reply. You keep trying to destroy our positions and eliminate our leadership, but we don't have fixed positions and we don't have centralized leadership. We're a network, not an army. We're a community, not a hierarchy. Chen added his voice to the transmission. Every person you face has spent their entire life learning to survive in conditions that would kill your soldiers in minutes. We don't need orders to know what to do. We don't need equipment to know how to fight. We don't need your permission to exist. Yuki's contribution was more technical. Your technology is designed for conquest through overwhelming superiority, but superiority is relative to environment. In our environment, your advantages become disadvantages. But it was Pemba's words that seemed to affect the Admiral most profoundly. Honorable Admiral, you have traveled between stars and conquered many worlds. This is impressive, but you have never learned to listen to the voice of a single mountain. How can you understand the language of an entire planet? Admiral Vorth's response took longer than usual, and when it came, his tone had changed subtly. You suggest that environmental adaptation is more significant than technological advancement? We suggest, Maya replied, that you've been asking the wrong questions. You ask how to conquer Earth. We ask how to live with Earth. Those are very different problems with very different solutions. The final lesson. The Admiral's next move surprised everyone. Instead of escalating to planet-killing weapons, he requested a meeting. A single shuttle descended from the flagship, carrying minimal escort and defensive equipment. Maya and her team, joined by representatives from mountain communities across the region, met the Kirathi delegation at a neutral site, a natural amphitheater formed by ancient ice flows at an altitude of 6,000 meters. Admiral Vorth was even more impressive in person than his transmissions had suggested. Nearly 8 feet tall, his crimson scales marked with the scars of military service across dozens of worlds, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. But Maya noticed something else. He was struggling with the altitude and cold despite his environmental suit. Dr. Thorne, the Admiral began, his breathing slightly labored. I have reviewed our tactical situation. Your resistance has been unexpected. How so? Maya asked, genuinely curious. In 47 previous conquests, resistance followed predictable patterns. Initial shock, disorganized fighting, attempts to match our technology, eventual surrender when the futility of resistance became apparent. The Admiral paused, adjusting his suit's oxygen supply. Your species has followed none of these patterns. You did not attempt to match our technology. You used our technological advantages against us. You did not organize traditional military resistance. You became the environment itself. Chen stepped forward. Admiral, with respect, you've been trying to fight a war of conquest against people who never needed to conquer anything. We learned long ago to work with forces more powerful than ourselves. Yuki added, your technology is magnificent for the environments it was designed for, but adaptation isn't about having the best technology, it's about having the right relationship with your surroundings. Pemba spoke last, his words carrying the weight of generations. Admiral Vorth, you command great power among the stars, but here, on this mountain, in this thin air, with this cold wind, you are learning what every child of the high places knows. The mountain is always the final teacher. The Admiral looked around at the assembled humans, representatives of a dozen different cultures and nationalities, speaking different languages, following different traditions, united only by their shared adaptation to one of Earth's most challenging environments. You are suggesting, he said slowly, that conquest of your species would require us to fundamentally change our nature. We're suggesting, Maya replied, that conquest might not be the relationship you're looking for. The mountain's wisdom. What followed was unlike any diplomatic encounter in Kirathi history. Instead of negotiations over surrender terms, the mountain communities began teaching the aliens about survival in extreme environments. Dr. Patel demonstrated how to read weather patterns using both traditional knowledge and scientific instruments. Dr. Mitchell showed Kirathi engineers how to modify their equipment for cold weather operation. Tenzin Norbu guided alien scouts through terrain navigation techniques that worked when all technology failed. Most remarkably, Pemba began teaching Admiral Vorth himself about the philosophy of mountain survival. Power used wisely conserves itself, he explained as they climbed to a meditation site above 7,000 meters. Power used carelessly exhausts itself quickly. The Admiral, breathing heavily despite his suit's assistance, asked, Are you suggesting that the Kirathi Empire has been using power carelessly? I am suggesting, Pemba replied, that there is a difference between taking what you want and receiving what you need. Over the following days, a remarkable transformation occurred. Kirathi forces, instead of preparing for conquest, began learning adaptation. Their engineers worked with human scientists to develop equipment that functioned reliably in extreme cold. Their military units trained with human guides in navigation and survival techniques. Admiral Vorth found himself spending hours in conversation with Maya and Pemba, discussing not conquest and resistance, but the fundamental differences between imposing control and achieving harmony. My species has always believed that survival requires dominance, the Admiral admitted during one of these conversations. The strongest survive by making others serve their needs. Maya gestured toward the vast mountain landscape around them. Admiral, look at this environment. Humans don't survive here by dominating the mountains. We survive by understanding our place within a larger system. But surely your species seeks to expand, to grow stronger, to control more resources. Pemba smiled, Admiral, the mountain grows by accepting snow. The snow becomes ice. The ice becomes part of the mountain. Growth through acceptance. Strength through understanding. The New Alliance. 3 months after their first arrival on Earth, the Kirathi made an announcement that shocked their own empire as much as it surprised humanity. Admiral Vorth's transmission to the Kirathi High Command was monitored by every intelligence agency on Earth. High Command, this is Admiral Vorth reporting from planet Earth. After extensive tactical analysis, I must report that conquest of this world would require resources exceeding the value of the conquest itself. The response from High Command was predictably angry. Explain how a primitive species has resisted the full power of the Crimson Fleet. High Command, the species is not primitive. They have achieved something we have not, complete adaptation to their environment. They do not fight their world. They have become part of it. To conquer them would require us to conquer their entire planet's biosphere. A long pause, then. Recommend alternative approach. High Command, I recommend alliance. The word sent shockwaves through the Kirathi Empire. Alliance implied equality. Alliance implied mutual benefit. Alliance implied that the supposedly primitive humans had something to offer the mighty Kirathi. Admiral Vorth's explanation revolutionized Kirathi thinking. These humans have achieved sustainable survival in environments we considered uninhabitable. Their adaptation techniques could allow Kirathi expansion into previously impossible territories. Maya listened to the intercepted communications with amazement. The mountain communities had not only defended their home, they had taught their would-be conquerors a new way of thinking about survival and growth. The formal alliance agreement was signed at Echo Base, witnessed by representatives from mountain communities across the globe and Kirathi fleet commanders from across their empire. The ceremony was simple but profound. Humans and aliens together on a wind-swept plateau, sharing knowledge and commitment to mutual survival. Admiral Vorth's closing words to the gathering carried a humility that had been entirely absent from his first communications. The Kirathi Empire has conquered 47 worlds by imposing our will upon them. Today, we learn from the 48th world by accepting its wisdom. Pemba responded with traditional mountain hospitality. Admiral, you are welcome to share the mountain's teachings. The mountain is patient with all students, even those who come from the stars. Epilogue, the endless story. 2 years later, Maya stood on the same observation deck of Echo Base where she had first spotted the Kirathi landing craft. But now, instead of alien invasion forces, she watched joint human-Kirathi research teams studying high-altitude adaptation techniques. Kirathi environmental technology, modified with human insights, was being used to establish research stations in previously impossible locations. Human survival techniques, enhanced with Kirathi materials science, were opening new frontiers for both species. Chen had been promoted to liaison officer for the Joint Mountain Warfare Training Program, where Kirathi military units learned human guerrilla tactics, while human forces studied alien logistics and equipment design. Yuki led a collaborative engineering project that was revolutionizing both species' approaches to extreme environment technology. Her modifications to Kirathi equipment had made their empire's expansion into cold-weather worlds possible for the first time. But perhaps the most significant change was in the younger generation. Human and Kirathi children learned together in high-altitude schools, sharing languages, traditions, and most importantly, respect for the environments that challenged and shaped them both. Pemba, now recognized as Earth's first ambassador to the mountain communities of known space, often reflected on the lesson the mountains had taught them all. True strength comes not from conquering what opposes you, but from learning to work with forces greater than yourself. The story that began with an attempted invasion had become something neither species had expected, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared challenges, and the wisdom that survival is not about dominance, but about adaptation. And in the high places of Earth, where the air is thin and the challenges are constant, humans and Kirathi worked together to push the boundaries of what was possible, always remembering the fundamental lesson the mountains had taught them. The summit is never the end of the journey. It is simply the beginning of the next ascent. The endless story of growth, adaptation, and the courage to reach for heights that once seemed impossible continues, written in the footsteps of two species who learned that the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from the wisdom to know when to climb together.